Good evening, Poe fans, and welcome back to Poe Discussions with Carmen and Jeanie. And hey, Jeanie.
Yo, I'm right here.
All right, are you ready?
I'm ready as I'll ever be.
All right, I am Carmen Bolden.
And I'm Jeanie Smith, and we
We
are
are
the
Poe-tastic
Potastic 2.
2.
All right, take a breath and say it. We're getting closer.
Yes. Oh, I thought that was actually much better than normal.
Really bad
Anyway.
when we can't do it in the same room, but
Yes, absolutely. So we have a very special guest this evening, and her name is Catherine Baab-Muguira. And Catherine, if you would love to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Like you said, I'm Catherine Baab-Muguira. I'm a writer and a journalist. In the last couple of years, I've contributed to the Wall Street Journal, Slate, CNBC, NBC News, a number of business publications. And then a couple of years ago, here's the Poe connection. I had a book come out, and it was about Edgar Allan Poe. It's a semi-satirical self-help book based on his life and work, and it's called Poe for Your Problems: Uncommon Advice from History's Least Likely Self-Help Guru. Yes. People can't hear this, but you're showing the book in the
Zoom. Take the glare off.
Yeah, wonderful. So that came out just a couple of years ago, and I'm a Poe obsessive. I guess that we're all Poe obsessives. That's why we're here, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. So tell us a little bit about your book.
Sure. The funny thing is that this is it's listed in the humor section at Barnes and Noble. Like if you want to find it's the only Poe work in the humor section at Barnes and Noble.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But honestly, it came from a dark place. Maybe we all come to Poe like this, but I had been a fan as a kid. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, where he is from too, as fans will know. And I read a lot of him as a kid. We get him in third and fourth grade here. I could remember.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, you get it real early. And I think a lot of it went over my head in terms of the violence and the darkness, but it did appeal to me too.
Yeah.
So anyway, I had a big phase with him then. And then as an adult, I came back after, it was just a dark period in my life. And I suddenly got this urge to start reading him again. And I went down a complete rabbit hole. And I read the Library of America editions, and those are just thousands of tissue thin pages, but I could not get enough.
Mm-hmm.
He was really speaking to me at that point. And I started to slowly develop this thought, especially as I dug into his letters and the biographies, just that he's an amazingly brave person. He obviously is a very flawed person too, but he stood up in the face of so much tragedy, professional disappointment, all sorts of disappointment, basically every variety. He experienced it. No one would choose to live his life. It was just so tremendously sad and disappointed. And yet, while all this was going on, he produced this body of work that we all love, and that is now famous the world over and has been translated into every major language. And it's a stunning example of strength in the face of adversity. Even I know that sounds cheesy, but it really did strike me that way at this moment when I was struggling. As soon as you have that thought, you start coming across people in history who've had the same one. And I think Poe is kind of an unspoken hero for a lot of people. And certainly the French have always read him this way. His French translator, Charles Baudelaire, had the same kind of epiphany I did, but then wrote about it in just a spectacular fashion. His essays on Poe are unbelievable.
They are, yes.
And we discussed him with Baudelaire before, so we understand.
Last season.
Yeah, Fatal Destinies is stunning. I wish I could read it in the original. I'm reading it in translation. But yeah, so Baudelaire, but then so many others, like y'all have probably come across Daniel Hoffman's Poe from 1972, and a number of other memoirs. You just come across this all the time of writers who are inspired by him and kind of had the same reaction. Years ago, I heard the writer of Mrs. Poe, that big novel that came out a couple of years ago. For some reason, I'm blanking on her name.
That one I don't think I'm as familiar with. That doesn't sound as familiar.
She was doing the keynote at a Poe thing I was at. And, she had a big publisher, and the book did very well. Like you could buy it in Target kind of thing.
Okay.
She just described her. She was in a dark place in her life. All of a sudden, she started reading Poe again. She ended up writing a novel about 1 year of his life, 1845.
Okay.
it's interesting to find that so many other people have had this experience, and it also makes you a lot less lonely to come across this kind of as a community of people who feel the same way. And it spurred my own writing. I read an essay about it initially, and that went kind of viral, arguing this case about seeing Poe in this particular way.
Okay.
And then that I was able to sell the book on the back of the popularity of the article. So I kind of think it's not ironic. It's very Poe-like that this childhood kind of friend helped me achieve what I was hoping to do.
Yeah.
So that's in a nutshell.
That's really amazing. And, you're not the first person to talk about, I kind of came to Poe as an adult, in a darker place and things like that. I think a lot of us do, just because, especially if you know Poe, you know about his life, you can kind of connect with him in so many different ways based on genres he wrote or just his life in general. Definitely.
And as we've discussed in different ways and different places over the years, is just like what you experienced, is as we've grown up, we've changed, we've gone through our own different traumas and things in life, and his stories affect us differently in different times of our life.
Yes.
And so each one of his, articles, or each one of his short stories, his poems, his one book, which I have yet to get through yet, but it's each thing he was so versatile. He had that versatility, and he had that touch with psychology that we didn't realize that we identified with so much and in so many different ways, and something that we may not have understood, as you said, like when you were third and fourth grade. I think I first met him when I was around fourth and fifth. That's when I first started reading his stuff, and you just don't experience that thing. You hear it, you think, oh, it's cool, it's about an animal or something like that, and that triggers something about how it gets you attention. But as you get older and you experience things in life, you see Poe for a whole different as a whole different person. I mean,
completely
you can
agree.
identify.
I said in that original essay, like, you just never step in the same Poe River twice. Even because you're bringing new experiences to it, and it's a kind of re-introspecting. You reread him at various points. I mean, some of the stories just strike you so differently. Like, the big example in my mind is The Pit and the Pendulum, which I read as a kid, and I took to be just kind of a horror, thriller, adventure kind of story about the Spanish Inquisition. You read that story as an adult, and it's extremely clear, at least to me, that he's talking about psychological pain.
Absolutely.
The human condition. And the fact that he's able to work on both those levels, and he talked about it in his letters too, like he described his artistic methods, as y'all know, like about how he thought that if you have two levels of meanings, that's the best case scenario, but you can never really allude to it completely directly. And I just, the fact that he pulls that off in that story, and again and again and again and again in so many different stories, this is an incredibly inspiring example as an artist of like someone who's able to achieve this commercial vision at the same time that he's saying something so profound and lasting and universal. So it's just tremendously inspiring. The other thing that I find interesting about reading him as an adult, and I'd be interested to see if y'all, if this resonates with you, never read him as a satirist when I was a kid. And I'm not even talking about the direct humor pieces. I mean, the Gothic stories, I take at least parts of them to be satires, where it's so over the top. It's almost like hysterical laughter when you laugh at something that's so awful. I have a very dark sense of humor. I love it.
We do too.
Don't worry. You're not alone.
You kind of know that you're going to have that in common.
Because I like, if I'm reading one of Poe's stories, for just entertainment or research or whatever, if I'm in the other room and my husband is in the other room, I might like laugh out loud at something, and he's like, oh, are you reading one of, the funnier stories of Poe? And I'm like, no, just dark humor, that comes out from one of the horror stories or whatever. And so, yeah, no, I totally get it. But I didn't necessarily get that as much as a young, adult kind of thing, like around 6th grade or so. So yeah, I totally get that.
Well, and even in high school, I don't think we could have completely understood the whole satire of
Yeah.
what he what he truly wanted to get. And it just comes along like we've been talking about it, with age, with
Yeah.
experience, with everything else. And then I'm sorry, I've developed more of a dark humor as the older I get.
Exactly.
Than I had, years ago, which, I have to say that, yes, I had the dark humor when I was in high school too.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it
Just
just
developed even further from there.
exactly.
Exactly.
Exactly. And then Lynn Cullen is the one
And
that wrote
Helen, you're right.
Mrs.
That's
Cullen.
it. She was
Yeah.
a great speaker, and I
Uh-huh.
haven't read the novel, but I was really moved by her story.
Yeah, I'm writing this. I always keep a notebook and pen with me whenever we do interviews, because we find so much information out. I always write notes,
Yeah.
and then Jeannie and I go back to those kinds of things. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And I was reading a little bit about how she came about writing this story, and
Mhm.
it sounds like it's very interesting and something to read. So
Okay.
it has, and that's the one thing about all the different people that we meet, that we all may be Poe fanatical, is what I like
Mhm.
to call it, Poe fanatical. We all may be some type of Poe fanatical, but at the same time, we all have such different inspirations and different, takes on
Yes.
things, that it just makes us more integrated and interconnected.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
and I think with Poe's writing, that is the epitome of him,
Yeah.
because he was very good about dry, whether it be dry humor, dark humor, whether it be anything with love or hate. I mean, come on, you can't have one without the other.
Very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he was such a multifaceted writer, which again, I feel like a kind of professional admiration. Like I'll never get there, but I admire it so much because I
Absolutely.
know I have some sense of how hard that is and how
Yeah.
smart you have to be and how good you have to be and how much craft you have to like have concentrated on. Maybe we all have that reaction because of those reasons, but
Yeah.
yeah, just my admiration grows. So in combination with like the strength of his character and standing up in the face of so much, there's this incredible level of craft, his versatility, his range.
Mhm.
It's a stunning, stunning career, all the more so in the circumstances. I don't, like you're saying, like he could be so funny. I definitely laugh out loud when reading him too, especially like the most horrible of the stories. And
Mhm.
then his letters are full of just him complaining about his bosses, like, gossiping about his friends, and just, I mean, telling obvious lies sometimes. And he just
Yes.
won the war for it. It's so recognizable and human. For a genius on that level to be so recognizably human and even petty.
Yeah.
I loved it. What's not to love, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, absolutely. So how long did it take you to write the book?
It's funny because it doesn't look like a very big book and it's packaged like a very light read. But it
Yeah.
was a couple of years. I
Okay.
read I had the experience in 2016. I wrote the essay in 2017. And then I sold the book in 2019. And it took me, I wrote the book in calendar 2020. So I
Mhm.
had a year under my contract to finish it.
Okay.
That was an interesting year to be writing about Poe because like the entire world went Mask of the Red Death and
Yes.
all these, interpretations. I remember reading newspaper editorials that reference Poe. Uh,
Mhm.
so anyway, he's always part of the atmosphere, I guess, but that was a particularly fruitful year for thinking about him, I think. And
I think it did bring a lot of people kind of face to face with him, unmasked rather than masked, with the COVID year and COVID year or two or whatever. And I know that like people that I worked with would, because knowing that how much I love Poe, and they would bring things up, and it's like, have you thought about this? Is like COVID's just like Mask of the Red Death, and I'm like, yes, I've thought about it. Thank you for sharing. Then we'd have a nice conversation.
Well, and on the
Absolutely.
same aspect of it, not just the Mask of the Red Death, it was the historical aspects that Poe liked to bring into his stories. Because, and this is because I was teaching history at the time, and bringing up about how the Black Plague and all of that, and how, the bells that they would hang in the cemeteries, with premature burial and all that kind of stuff, and how he was very much a proponent of bringing the societal norms of the time into his works, that they transcend over so many generations, that it just hit upon how I kept telling the kids, history repeats itself. And yes, we learn little bits, but we never completely learn everything, because it has to keep a revolution. It keeps going and going. And so the Mask of the Red Death was the perfect example in the pandemic of bringing in the society trends of the, I hate to say it, the bubonic plague. And most people think the bubonic plague is no longer in existence, but there are cases of bubonic plague every year. But it's just not as known, because we've developed the antibiotics and we've developed the way to combat it. So it's not, and we didn't kill all the cats like the Catholics did, and make the rats rampant with their fleas either. So, but speaking of cat, sorry, Catherine.
No, you're
fine. But with your book, and I'm gonna admit I haven't had a chance to read it yet, because Carmen's harboring the copy.
Yes, I have read the whole thing and I could not put it down. I loved it. It was awesome.
But
Thank you so
just when
much.
she told me the name and I looked up the book, I went, it may be listed as humor, but it's just so perfect.
Yeah.
Because if anybody would know anything about the crap that we have to deal with in life, it would be Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah.
And the sad part is I think he never actually got to experience what his work truly meant to people.
Yeah.
And that makes me sad to know that he never understood. It's kind of like with the painters that die before they actually get to see the experience of their art. And that's the way I look at Edgar. It's like, I am so heartbroken to know that he never once got even close to feeling what he is encompassing now in our society. So
it's such a profound question. Like, does posthumous fame justify your suffering, or just the hours you spend on it? And I mean, most of us will never achieve Poe's level,
no.
But yet we spend a large part of our time, working on our stuff. And I like the way that his life and work both ask and fail to answer that question about whether it's worth it. Maybe one body of work couldn't. Maybe the question's just open, but it's humongous. I'm not sure. I don't know where I even come down on that. It kind of varies by the day. Sometimes I think that the simple act of making the work, the creative act, that is where you're going to get any payoff. And there are payoffs involved. The absorption that you have when you're working. I think Poe, too, having been such an astute critic, could understand why his own work was good. So I think he pleased himself, at least at moments. No one pleases themselves all the time.
Yeah.
But again, you're right. None of the money, none of the fame, none of the awareness of having this absolute global impact and being such a humongous picture, like not just in American literature, in Spanish language literature, French language literature.
Yeah.
he's a huge presence in Romanian literature of all things. So anyway, yeah, I
Well,
feel you.
And I think you mentioned something about, some days he may have been, pleasing to himself with what he was writing, but he was constantly re-editing because there's so many versions of his work. When we were doing the birthday episode with Virginia and Levi, we decided, we were like, well, let's find a positive poem to celebrate his birthday, and so we picked The Happiest Day. And the first version I found had, Jeanie, was it 6 stanzas, I think?
No, it had 5.
It had
The
5.
original one
Yeah.
had 5, but then it was re-edited
And he
3
had
or 4 more times
6.
and had
Yeah.
6. Yes.
And so it was like, whoa, we've got to all use the same version. And we didn't realize it was that vast of a difference. And
Yes.
we've noticed, slight word changes or, something like that. But it's like, oh, this is quite different.
And
Like-
so that leads me. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Catherine.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just actually going to ask about, you introduced and I read about on your website how you are a journalist and have, written articles for like the Wall Street Journal and other vast avenues. But the Wall Street Journal one always strikes me the most is because people, when they hear Wall Street Journal, automatically just think it's a bunch of stock, everything. They don't realize how much is actually embedded within the Wall Street Journal. And it may not be, riddled with all these pictures that you see in regular newspapers and everything. But if you look at the actual articles, they're just so in depth and so much about what's the world around us. So I was kind of curious is, one, how long have you been a journalist? And 2, what types of articles have you kind of submitted for these journals?
Sure. It's been a sort of long road. My dad was a journalist, so I was always sort of aware of it. But he got out of newspapers in 1991, kind of seeing the writing on the wall. At that time, he worked in evening newspapers, and we all know what happened to those.
Yes.
So, I think as early as 1991, you can see that the business was going to be extremely troubled. And now, as I became an adult, I was a college student in the early aughts, majoring in journalism. Even then, everyone kind of did realize that we're going to experience this massive change, but it wasn't really until 2008 where I think we started to see the die-off of publications. This was an incredibly fraught time to try to be working as a journalist. And one of the ways I tried to adapt was I've never worked full-time as a journalist. I always did it on the side on top of other jobs where I did marketing, copywriting, writing ads, basically writing marketing material, and then doing the journalism on the side because I love it. But also knowing how unstable it is, I just kind of did it as a side hustle. So in 2008, I started writing for one of the newspapers in my hometown of Richmond. And I did that for a couple of years, just doing arts coverage. I met them at a party or something, the editors, and I sort of, I'll file a story. Oh, do you want to let me write 1,000 words about singing karaoke every night for a week? Or, little stunt pieces.
Fun.
And then at the time, rates weren't terrible. You'd make a couple $100 for each piece, or sometimes you'd get paid as $800. So I did it on the side for money because I really wasn't making a whole lot as a copywriter at the time. And then very slowly it grew into pitching and getting stories with much larger publications. So, I just started to write about, myself. Sometimes personal essays were a very big thing in the 2010s on the internet.
Yeah.
Did some of that. And then I did some local news reporting, some regional news reporting. I'm not straight hard news in the sense of working in a newsroom, but stories that weren't nearly as timely because I was doing it on the side, right? I couldn't be reporting daily news or anything like that. So local publications, regional publications, then eventually national ones. It's interesting you say that about the journal because it's a controversial paper in my freelancer network. Not everyone agrees, especially but not commenting on that one way or another, their standards are incredibly high. I've
can
never
imagine.
worked so hard. They have the highest standards you're going to come across in the journalism world. And their weekend review is incredible. Adam Kirsch, the editor there, is an incredible, he covers their, writing books, reviews, that sort of thing. He's incredibly bright and good, intimidatingly so. But it was a long road. It took a long time to get to those levels. And I pitch all the time. Like I, suggest to an editor that I want to write X, Y, Z, and you get rejected all the time still. It never stops.
Yeah.
But I wish I'd been born in a different era, but also Poe's era shows us, his journalism jobs were incredibly unstable.
Yes, yes.
Laid off, and his checks were late, and everything that a freelancer faces now, he faced in the 1840s. So, and there's something comforting about that.
Yeah, and I was going to say a lot of movies even portray freelance writing as the same. Just all through the era of film, when you think about it.
Well, any type of freelance work is very much difficult because it's a hit or miss. You have to follow the trends, you have to follow the times, you have to understand what will sell, what won't sell, because it's like you're marketing yourself along with what you do for a living. And as you said, I think that's one of the things that Poe did. Well, some systems, so some well, some not, but
like anyone.
Yeah, like anyone. But him being critical in his magazines and stuff shows, as you said, how diverse and how, I'm going to say it too, a touch of a genius the man was, both on paper and off paper. Just as world round he could go. He talked about places that he probably maybe visited once or twice or never visited. He wrote about them. And yes, I kind of wish in some ways that we were in some of the times, like with the journals and with the newspapers of I'm going to say like 30 or 40 years ago, at least 40 years ago, in some good, some bad. There's always going to be good and bad, no matter what. And I think there's even still a Dear Abby around today. But it's not as prominent in newspapers anymore. You see it as more as an online presence.
Yeah.
But
definitely so. Well, one thing I want to go back to is talking about when you were growing up in Richmond and Poe was taught as early as third grade. In Tennessee, it's really around seventh grade. And so third grade, I think some kids can handle it at that age. And I know I could have if I was introduced with reading Poe then. We did not have it in our curriculum then, but I'm fascinated by that. And so you said The Raven is something that you guys read that young, and what else did they teach around third and fourth grade, if you remember?
Yeah, I have a very distinct memory of, it was in my fourth grade class on Halloween that my teacher had us put our heads down on our desks and close our eyes while she read The Raven out loud.
Nice.
And so we could experience it. And it's a poem that's it's meant to be heard. It's so musical. It has these amazing, like, dark rhythms. And it struck me, even though I'm not getting all the implications, all the complexities, and how, from a craft standpoint, how sophisticated it is.
Yeah.
You just hear it and you like it and you understand how articulate he's being about a sadness, I think, that we all feel, whether we've lost a particular woman or not.
Yeah.
So that is probably my sheer earliest. I know I'd come across him. You just can't avoid him in Richmond. He's everywhere. He's in Merrill. There's on literal Main Street. So, and my parents were readers too. And I had a grandmother who was an English teacher. So
cool.
We had a lot of books in the house. And I think once I found him, the fact that he was talking about these dark things really struck me as a kid, because I was looking for someone to be honest with me about those things, I think. So I just tore through. I can remember reading The Premature Burial. I can't believe I was allowed to read that, but I think my parents just weren't paying enough attention.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I mean, the Oblong Box, Cask of Amontillado, Murders in the Rue Morgue, all of that. There's just something. I mean, they're tremendously violent, and
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. Especially Rue Morgue. Yes.
yeah, the violence. It's crazy, but it's also striking and memorable. The way he holds
Yes.
your attention as a reader is always very impressive too. So anyway,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think I just binged a couple of compilation or
Okay.
anthologies when I was a little kid.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Yeah, and I mean, and I can remember watching horror movies with my dad growing up, and my one of my brothers especially. And and I was a reader, and it's like I wish I would have been exposed earlier to Poe's writings, but it was probably about sixth, seventh grade for me. So I always ask those kinds of things because it just that fascinates me.
Fair. I mean, who knows? Maybe we would all turned out even weirder and less well adjusted if we had
That's
found him
true.
sooner. Who knows? Maybe it was fortunately late that we found him. Who knows?
That
I'm
is
kind of
true.
worried of thinking if I could have turned out weirder, that might have been a
That's
bad thing.
true.
But
Yeah, that
but
Jeannie, that
going
is
back
very
to your,
true.
yeah, I know. Going back to your we're gonna call it a self-help book.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How well did it help you writing it? I mean, because I can see that the writing about it and seeing it from all sides, even though I can swear I haven't read the book yet, and I will, I promise.
Yes,
But
I've got to get it to her.
exactly. But just, I know how difficult it can be to get things right. Like we were saying, we edit, re-edit, rewrite, edit, rewrite, all this kind of stuff. And you within a time frame, you had a year, you said, to get it done.
Mhm.
So what did you experience trying to get it put together exactly the way you wanted it and putting it as, hey, this is Poe, this is Poe helping.
That's a really good question. And always the thing I want to hear writers talk about, even if it's not specific to Poe.
Hmm.
Uh, so writing a book in a year is just hard to begin with because I was working full time. A very few writers. You have Stephen King, and basically no one else can make a living at it. So you have to do things in addition to it. So I would just get up really early in the mornings. I was also pregnant with my first child. So that
Okay.
was interesting too. And I was having a kind of a rough pregnancy. Uh,
Mhm.
but I mean, the fact that someone was trying to come alive through me and was like consuming my body and so on, that was an interestingly poet-like experience. The
Yeah.
tremendous pressure under which I mean, people write under greater degrees of pressure, but I felt like very under pressure at the moment
Yeah.
in between working full time and trying to produce a book to somebody else's standard in a year.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, the tremendous pressure of that, the commercial pressure you feel to write a book that can sell, that people are going to like and review and, rate and all the rest of it, all the things that have to happen now to have a career. And Poe experienced essentially those things too. So I felt very close to him, especially when I was up early in the morning and the, world was still dark. And it was just me and me writing about him. So there were parts of it that were just amazing and transcendent. And I felt, I was enjoying myself just tremendously working on it.
Hmm.
But at the same time, it was an interesting creative challenge because you're trying to meld a bunch of different forms together. And, there aren't tons of books in this genre, like of taking Gothic writers and doing a self-help reading of them. But I will say that I thought Poe's examples of satire, where he was both earnest and laughing at the form, and he was critical of the form at the same time that he's working within it. That
Hmm.
was very inspiring to me, and that's what I tried to do myself whenever I got lost.
Hmm.
Like, take the parts of self-help that you think are useful and good, and why the form survives from year to year, but then bring a critical lens to it and like add this edge of hysterical laughter to the entire project. I don't know. That's what I was trying to achieve, and that was very much based on his example. And it
Hmm.
was tremendously fun to do. I will say I can barely look at it now because like that word choice is terrible. That's the wrong verb.
Yeah, you
I think,
go back and reread things that, you wrote like a month ago. I know I do the same thing. Things
mhm,
I wrote just a month ago, and I look at it and go, what was I thinking?
yeah,
That doesn't belong there. That could be written so much better.
yeah.
So, and it's
We're
a
our own
process.
worst critics, definitely.
Exactly.
Yeah,
True. It's why writers are tortured or why artists are tortured, I think, is
yeah,
just because you would have done it. Now you can see how you should have done it perfectly. And, you know,
yeah, yeah. Because there's so many times it's like I'll have an idea and then it's like, or it won't come to me. And then after, Jeannie and I do something, or I'm doing one of my own creative things. And then like 2 months later, I'll go, oh, that's what I should have done. It's like, I can redo, I guess, but then I don't want to.
Yeah. And can you
absolutely.
think that maybe thinking about it in that aspect of things, that maybe Poe was um, being ridiculed even more by himself because he was not only a critic of his own work, but he was criticizing other works,
Yeah,
and so, and we know that we can see things that other people can't, or we view things differently. It's all about the audience too,
yeah,
between, the self, the audience, uh, all those kind of things. So he could have been fighting his own demons while trying to fight the demons of being a critic himself.
yeah. That's
That's even
true.
worse.
I think it comes through. I think you're dead right.
Yeah.
He struggles with the form openly, kind of. And he certainly, I mean, struggled with it openly in conversations with friends, in his letters, and in his critical essays. He says a lot of things and then immediately doubles back and, recants what he just said. And some of his theories become utterly, in my view, self-serving. And that's not a term of criticism I'm using. Like, I
Right,
think
right.
self-serving worldviews. Um,
Yeah,
anyway, yeah, it's really interesting and inspiring to watch him wrestle with that because it's what we all wrestle with, even if we're not
hmm,
on this level.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's
Well,
the crux of, the crust of being an artist, no matter what you do, well, no
yeah,
matter what the medium, it is what it is. Like
it's true.
Carmen said earlier, we are our own worst critics.
Hmm.
And in the aspect that we are our own worst enemies. So,
Yes. They go
so,
hand in hand.
so are you working on anything else,
Yeah,
like a book
Jeannie, you
wise?
beat me to that. I was about to
I
ask that.
knew you were about to come out, so I thought I'd beat you to it.
You did. That's okay.
Uh, I'm working on a horror novel that is set in Richmond.
Oh,
It
nice.
certainly takes inspiration from Poe and some of his like incredible, he's so good at describing these extreme physical states.
Mhm.
Yes.
But I often read him as an example because I don't feel that's a very difficult thing to do. People, maybe lay people or non-writers don't necessarily understand like what it is to convey that amount of detail and to keep readers' attention at the same time and to
Hmm.
keep attention taut. So yeah, that's what I'm working on now. It's very slow going. Also, when I wrote the first one, I didn't have a kid.
Right.
And it was a little different. So it's going a lot slower than I would like. But hopefully I do get there overall. It was my dream was to be a fiction writer. So I'm
Okay.
hoping that I eventually get to like published novelist status. So, but we'll see.
That's
Um,
awesome.
the difference with novels is you write the entire thing and then you sell it, whereas with a nonfiction book, you sell off a proposal. You don't have to write the entire book first. So it feels dicey to write an
Yeah.
entire book without a contract, but we'll see. What are you going to do but try?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly right. Well, it sounds really interesting, and I know something that we would both love to read. So,
Well, thank you. I hope we get there.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. That is
Especially
awesome.
with horror. And if you stick a little satire in there with the horror, you've got us right there. Boom. We're there.
Yes.
Right? That's the form I love too. So hopefully I can achieve it. If not, I'll just have spotted it in other people's work, like you sometimes do.
Well, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We'll help try to do our part and, push push it and push
I
it and say,
appreciate
hey,
that.
you got to
Thank
follow her. You got to follow her.
Absolutely. And Poe, for your problems, I know you won one award. Was it two different awards you won or was nominated?
We were a finalist for the Library of Virginia's Nonfiction Award. It gets
Yes.
Katie Couric, which was awesome. I was proud
Oh, wow.
in that circle. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, so we were one of four finalists there, and then we won the at the Saturday Visitor Awards at the Poe Festival.
That's awesome. That is
Yeah.
amazing. That is very
That's where I
cool.
heard Lynn Cullen speak.
Okay. Okay. Well, very cool. Well, Jeanie, what other questions do you have?
Well, I asked her about what she has going on in the future. So
Mm-hmm.
I got that covered. So I'm just trying to, I don't think I can think of anything right this moment. So what do you
Well,
have?
Well, and I was going to say one thing we always share out with our listeners and viewers. I always want to say watchers, but that just sounds creepy. But I guess that's very Poe-esque, so we'll go with it.
Hey, we're not
But
calling them stalkers, so that's good.
that's true. That is so true. But you've got your website we'll share out, and then what other social media platforms if you want to share that out with our people?
I have Instagram. I'm not particularly good at that, but you can find me on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, all under Kat Baab-Muguira or Catherine Baab-Muguira. And you can find the book Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Any independent bookstore is going to have it. Yeah, so I hope people check it out and it makes them laugh. If you have a dark sense of humor and you love Poe, then I think it's going to be in your lane. I often get the thing I've enjoyed so much about this project coming out in the world is that it connects me with incredibly like-minded people. Like we have this kind of personality.
Yes.
If you get this joke, then we're going to be friends. So
I agree. And one thing we've mentioned multiple times with talking to, as we call them Poe people, it's just the Poe community is so friendly and just it's like a little Poe family, and like you said, like-minded people, and just kind of think in the lines of Poe and not just thinking about him as just a horror writer. He's so many levels, like a onion, breaking it down, peeling all the love.
It actually make you cry too. So
Yes.
you're right.
Oh, that is so true.
yeah.
Well, Catherine, are you going to be at any events in the future? I know, like, we got to meet for the first time at the Poe Fest last October. So
I think I'll be back there. I've mostly got my head down, and for the first time in a while, I'm just turning speaking engagements down just because I'm trying to produce book two.
okay.
But I'll be at the Poe Festival in Baltimore, and usually I'm often at the one in Richmond if people want to try to find me there too.
Okay, great. Yeah, we're hoping to be also back at the Poe Fest in October as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're only a booth away, so that'll be
cool. Yeah, that hopefully will be close. I know that Poe Movies we were right next to them the first year we were there 2 years ago, and they were still not too far away. So yeah, it's cool seeing everybody.
Agreed.
Yeah. So Jeanie, anything else?
Nope, I think that's got it covered, except for what we always like to ask. Out of all of those stories and poems, what is your favorite and why?
And we always ask too, it could be you love a poem or story, or you have one of each. So feel free to answer however.
We all have like the same dilemma with trying to narrow it down, but The Man of the Crowd is my favorite story. It's
great.
Such a profound description of loneliness and, feeling like a misfit. And at the same time, it's kind of a compelling adventure in its own right, and an interesting take on cities and how we relate to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then just the writing in it is incredible. There's a quote from it that opens the book. It had to be an epitaph, but yeah, among the poems, that's like Sophie's Choice by Ullalum. I love that.
That's a great one.
My heart was volcanic. I think that one has a lot of post poetry have those incredibly almost sick rhythms to them, where you're just moving toward a terrible conclusion. That one is just insane how well it works,
Yeah.
and how dramatic it is, and almost like dramatic to the point of absurdity, which I love too. So
Mhm.
I think it's so hard to say, but all right, today those were my favorites.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to narrow them down because they're all so good and for different reasons, of how it
And
can.
can fit with whatever's going on in our lives at the time too.
Yes, yes,
So,
absolutely. Well,
and Man in
Catherine,
the Crowd is one I want to say this. The Man of the Crowd is the one that we have not heard from anyone before.
that is
So thank
true.
you for bringing that one out,
Yes.
because I love that one, not only just for the title, but the vision that it brings to mind.
Hmm.
I can see the artistry as he's writing it with that story.
Yeah.
And I can see a lot of people of that time period and their artworks as I'm reading it. So,
Mhm.
thank you for bringing out that one. It's a very good one, and people need to know that there's
Oh,
more than just the Raven and Telltale Heart.
Yes.
Not that I'm not a fan of, but
I love those too, of
Yeah.
course.
Oh,
But some of the deep
absolutely.
cuts are just stunning. So yeah, I hope people check out The Man in the Crowd, because you can, like any Poe, you can read it in about 10 minutes, and
yep.
it's
Yeah.
just incredibly profound and also interesting to read. It's like in a little thriller. So
Yeah, it really is.
It'd be exciting.
mhm.
Yes. Well, Catherine, it has been a pleasure having you on the podcast.
Thank you for having
Yes.
me. I was just listening to
Yeah.
the last episode before we got on the call, and
Oh, great.
yeah,
Great.
that was super cool. I'm convinced by what he said by 2-act structure, so people should look up that interview. I thought he was being very smart about what he was saying about structure and
Oh yeah,
stories.
RA's great. We had a great time with him talking with him as well. So, and he was at the Poe Fest too. I don't know if you got to meet him.
I don't think so. I'll look for him next year.
Yeah, he was nominated for a Saturday Visitor Award for Into That Darkness Peering. Yeah, so he'll probably be back, and you'll really enjoy speaking with him.
I'll
So
bet.
yeah, but thank you again for being on here. And Jeanie, are you
We
ready?
are. Yep. We are
Poe
Poe out.
out.